If you like the work that I've said and you like the things I've done, there is a greater consciousness expansion that we're going through as a civilization. There's a greater awakening. These people were not ruled by fear. They took risks that most people will not take. And each of us has the opportunity to really redefine who we are. To say, well, I reject fear and I reject darkness. I want to live in a peaceful world. I want to live in a world of happiness and joy and bliss. And it is a beautiful thing to be able to see the truth for the first time. And I want to talk for a moment about the psychedelic experience. I have never hidden that I did use LSD and psilocybin mushrooms before I became sober 26 years ago. And one of the things that happened for me with the psychedelic experience was that I got thrown into these bad trips. And I think pretty much every trip, if people decide to do that, and I'm not saying you should, it's very dangerous, but if you do that, any psychedelic experience, at least from my experience, you have some very intensely diabolical bad trips during the experience. Now, why am I bringing this up? I'm bringing this up because on some level, it was a teacher, it was a coach. It taught me how to go to a place, whether I wanted to or not, because I didn't have a choice, how to go to a place of the most diabolical fear, insane paranoia, ridiculous levels of anxiety, ridiculous levels of panic, much more than what would normally qualify as somebody saying they had a nervous breakdown or a panic attack. And you get stuck in this zone and you can't get out. And because of the distortion of time that happens in psychedelic experience, you could end up having what appears to be hours upon hours upon hours of an experience so horrific that I can't even really describe what it's like, where let's say that you're so terrified that you could even get into a loop where, like, you're afraid that if you move your body, that everything around you is going to break and shatter and fall to pieces. And as silly as that sounds in a sober consciousness, a psychedelic bad trip, the paranoia that you have, can be just this soul-consuming dread that goes so far beyond anything you've ever had any other time in your whole life. And you get stuck in it. And so whether you're dealing with it in a traditional shamanic ceremony or even with modern guides, what you're coached on is, instead of running from the bad trip, you go into the bad trip, you explore it, you engage it, you let the feelings fully come through. You let yourself totally take that on the chin. Process the fear, process the dread, process the terror. And it's only through doing that, instead of running from it, that you are able to then objectively analyze what you are thinking and feeling and come to a conclusion that this is not me, this is not real. Or maybe this is part of reality, but it's not all of reality. So in that sense, and this also could happen even with marijuana, like certain types of marijuana can have some very powerful psychedelic experiences. So even if you did that, you could end up getting into one of these bad trips. And that's legal now. So my point is, I think that there is a greater consciousness expansion that we're going through as a civilization. There's a greater awakening. And a lot of people are not ready to cross that line and go into the bad trip. But you have to experience a bad trip to understand the world. You have to live for a period of time in that zone where you become a paranoid freak, where you are afraid of the phone, you're afraid of your laptop, you're afraid of the television, you're afraid to go outside because satellites might be looking at you, you're afraid of talking to your friends because how do you know if they're compromised or who's talking to them? You're afraid to drive your car, you're afraid to go to work, you're afraid to go to school, you're afraid to talk to your parents. Everybody's been through this stuff. You're afraid to look at a video like this on the internet. You're afraid to watch a movie. You're afraid to listen to a radio show or read an article or read a book. All of that stuff is so real to people that it's very common for people who feel that they are in the higher consciousness community, okay, to say, well, I reject fear and I reject darkness and I reject depressing information. I create my own reality. I'm not creating that stuff. I want to live in a peaceful world. I want to live in a world of happiness and joy and bliss and God consciousness, or whatever you want to call it. Here's the problem. If you are not willing to do your homework, if you're not willing to face the shadow, if you're not willing to engage the bad trip, then you are, in a sense, in universal terms, tacitly allowing these kids to be abducted, to be raped, to be tortured, to be killed, to be cannibalized, to be organ harvested. On some level, we are granting permission for that process to be happening if we feel like, well, it's just too dark, it's too negative, it's too scary, it's too effed up, I can't take that in, I can't redo my life with this information being part of it. And so, as upsetting as it is, it's a lot healthier from a psychological perspective, from a Jungian archetypal psychology perspective, to do the shadow work, to dive in there, to look at the ugly stuff, to process it. And once you do, once you allow yourself to accept that bad trip, to accept the possibility that this could be true, that the world could be like this, and you get through the feeling of wanting to throw up, and you get through the feeling of not wanting to get out of bed, and you get through the feeling that you can't keep food down, and you get through the feeling that you don't want to talk to anybody, and that you are, cold and clammy, and you're having the cold sweat, and you move through that, and you realize, okay, I'm still here, there is still goodness in this world, there is still positivity in this world, but I can allow this bad trip to be part of the world. Then you are officially woke, and now you can see it. Now you can see the obvious, and it is a beautiful thing to have that awakening. It is beautiful on a spiritual level to be able to see the truth for the first time.
Everyone's throwing around this phrase of like, oh, I'm woke now, but really it's like when you really start waking up to the truth, there's always more. There's always more things that you can go deeper and deeper and deeper. And it's like these things that you were bringing up, especially like the satanic ritual abuse and all of these things. Like this is the really dark and gritty, horrible things. And even people who are awake, I guess you could say, there's always more. There's always like you can never stop researching. There's always more you can learn, and there's always more that you can just see within yourself.
Yeah, not just on the surface, but also spiritually as well.
And spiritually, yeah.
Right. And also, just one thing, some people may be thinking the scenario you talked about where you're like scared to kind of do things is only something these crazy conspiracy theorists would have an issue with or something like that, the telltale tinfoil hat thing. But actually there are a lot of people out there who believe that once more of the truth gets uncovered, that collectively as as a whole, a lot of us are going to be doing this. A lot of us are going to be, as you said, like dealing with this sort of bad trip, and how are we going to handle that? I mean, literally, this is one of the reasons why we wanted to start Edge of Wonder, was to try to prepare people for some of these disclosure things that are going to rock our collective worlds.
Well, and I think Corey Good explains it really well, that when full disclosure really happens, it's not going to be this kumbaya moment where we're all going to come together and be like, oh, great.
Technology,
it's
energy.
It's going to be very hard, because it's going to shake people to the core. They're going to have to really see things that they may not, it's going to shake our beliefs in a lot of different things, our understanding of the way things are in life, who we are, the reality of things.
Sometimes I feel that the Alliance folks are not giving humans enough credit. You look at what it's like for us as a society to go through something like the Jim Jones mass cult suicide that took place in Guyana, which I lived through. I was young enough to remember it, and my parents were, I'm seeing these images of, hundreds and hundreds of dead bodies, and all these people that drank Kool-Aid, which then became a colloquial expression of drinking the Kool-Aid as a way for us to collectively cope with this. We've been through World War II, we've been through London being bombed, we've been through cities like Hiroshima and Nagasaki having nukes dropped on them, people getting radiation poisoning and mutations. We've been through mechanized slaughter of millions of people. We are prepared as a society to handle really dark, really upsetting information. It doesn't mean that people are going to stop going to work. It doesn't mean that society will come to a screeching halt. We learn how to have a sort of stately, quiet, reserved will to move forward. We continue to do what needs to be done so that society doesn't fall apart. And I think we need more credit for that.
Yeah, I mean, that's a really good point. And also, I think that there is a huge divine influence too, that when all of this happens, it's not going to be all doom and gloom, that there's also going to be this really bright side that will go with it. And what you're saying, I mean, I think you're right. We have been through a lot. And I think this is what I was going to say, is that, and there's a lot of people really, truly waking up to all these different things. I mean, I think that's what we've seen with our channel and so many other new channels coming out, so many people talking about this. I'm seeing more people talking about it on Facebook than I've ever have. And, my understanding is that we will be helping when all of this comes out. Like, some of these people are just going to be like, oh my gosh, my life is over, I don't know what to do. And then it's like, well, this is why we're here. We're here to help with this process, because we're all going through it together. Some of us are just a little bit more informed than others. And, this is what I see us doing, is that we will help wake up and help guide the people who feel very lost.
And what could be better than two dorks with utterly generic 3-word names like Ben and Rob? I'm just waiting for you guys to find Joe and Ted now, that's all.
Exactly.
Hours we spent thinking about that, David. Figuring all of that out. It's really hard work.
That's exactly it. But going real quick, when you were talking about the whole drug thing, I actually went through that personally. In fact, when you were describing it, my hands started sweating just even thinking about that experience that I had. I was trying to figure out in my head, it's been about 25 years for me too, since I did anything really bad like that. And I just had the worst experience ever. And my understanding is that drugs force these things open. You have no control. It's like your third eye opens. It's this gateway. You have no control over what's coming in and what's coming out. And for me, it was like these really negative things were starting to like attack me and get into me. And this is when I realized I can't do this anymore. And I thought I was gonna die. I was like, that's it, I'm going to die. Like, I literally thought in my head, this is it, this is like the end of me. And this was like, I think I was like back in the year 2000. I think I was like 20 or something. And I just remember thinking and praying in my head. I'm just like, God, I know you're real. And if I wake up tomorrow morning, I'll never do this ever again.
I had literally the same exact experience.
Really?
I was like, I swear, I will never do this again the whole time.
Yeah.
The whole time.
Yeah, and I immediately passed out. And I woke up the next morning with a headache, and everything was gone out of my system. And I was just like, that's it.
You're luckier than me, man.
No more.
I had to wait that out. That was not fun at all. And I never did it again. I mean,
yeah.
I was good.
I've heard many people tell me that they only tripped once and that it was so diabolical and so awful and horrific that they were cured of the desire to ever ingest psychedelics again. That's very common.
Yeah, it's so curious to me because, you know, this peer pressure thing everyone's talking about. It's awesome, try it, you know, this stuff that you do, and you're like, what the heck?
Yeah, it was too much for me. I think my mind works, anyway, I can't handle it. So that's the end of it.
Wonderful.
During the era that I was in high school, we had a great pop song or rock song that warned us about this, which was outshined by Soundgarden. And if you listen to those lyrics, you know, the whole thing is about him having a bad trip. You know, I just looked in the mirror and what I see ain't looking so good. You know, and it goes on and on. I'm getting chills thinking about it. And so I'd heard that song before I did this, but I didn't understand the song until I actually tried it.
Till it was too late. Then you're like, I get you, Chris Cornell. I get you.
We're all going through this process, and I really hope that by putting this stake in the ground and marking out this land, this new land of consciousness expansion, that people can really start to think differently about the negative, about negativity, and realize that the higher beings, if you read some of the works that I feel are really indicative of how these higher beings, these extraterrestrial angelic intelligences really think about us and see us. The Law of One, of course, is my favorite. I think it's the preeminent revealed teaching of modern times. It says that most of us to the higher beings are like children. And I think one of the ways that we are like children is how much we willfully lie to ourselves, how much we will knowingly overlook something when we just don't want to do the homework. We don't want to eat bitter, to use a Chinese expression. We want to avoid having to deal with something. We don't want to face the music, to use another colloquialism. And a lot of people, if you look at, for example, these biographies about people who are successful, people who made a very successful name for themselves, they generate prosperity, they generate fame, whatever it is that they do, it's so consistent that these people were not ruled by fear. They took risks that most people will not take. You guys are out there doing this right now instead of just doing a wage slave 9-to-5 job and having to struggle just to get by, and then not ever being willing to leave that security blanket behind, regardless of how annoying your life is. If you're trapped in that little cell, you're like a slave who just has the freedom to go to and from work and wherever else you go, like the grocery store. It's only if you can free yourself, it's only if you have the fearlessness to eat bitter, to face the shadow, to take those risks, to make that leap of faith, to actually start talking about what's really going on, to take those progressive steps to invest in yourself, to invest in your future, and knowing that it's not going to work out right away, knowing that you're going to have a really hard time, knowing that it could be years of adversity potentially, like it was for me to build into the career that I now have. I didn't fall back, and I didn't get a regular 9-to-5 job. Ever since 1998, I went self-employed. I was getting $30 bouncing fees from the banks all the time, you know, like 4 or 5 a month. I called it like a poverty tax. I couldn't have a credit card. I barely made enough money to keep the lights on. I didn't have enough money to pay my taxes, but I wouldn't have owed anything anyway because I really didn't have any income. And yet, look at what we've accomplished now as a society. And each of us has the opportunity to really redefine who we are and to not be limited by the boundaries that our fear put around us, that we then worship that box and we say, well, this is my safety. I need this box. I need to stay in this matrix existence. It's not true.
Right. I agree. You know, and kind of what you were going on from the very beginning about these kind of different beings and whatnot. In our last one, or I think it was the first episode that we filmed with you, and you mentioned that this Ben Kenobi came to you, like this being, this entity that represented Ben Kenobi came to you and whatnot. And we were like laughing about it, and I kind of apologized because we weren't laughing because we were making fun of you. We were laughing because we both understood what that meant. And we've always talked about this quite often, that when beings like that come to us, they usually appear to us in forms that we're most comfortable with because they don't want to scare us. So that's why when you said that, I was like, well, that's very interesting that they came to you as that, probably because you're younger and you don't really have any concept of too many people that you feel that you feel really super comfortable with. So I'm more saying this to the people watching this because we got some comments and people thought we were like making fun of you, and it's like, no, it's not at all. We actually completely understood what was going on with that situation.
Let me nibble on that one for just a second, and then we'll keep going. Jungian psychology or depth psychology, there's different names for it. He talks about the transcendent aspect. And this is a part of ourselves that is beyond the ego, beyond the conscious thinking, rational mind, that appears to have resources, including what he would call an oversoul, some sort of collective mind that's like the sum total of human knowledge. He believed in astrology. He believed in that planets and the positions that we go through on the Earth as we move through the solar system have archetypes, have qualities. He said that the 12 basic signs in the zodiac are like this beautiful breakdown of 12 different types of personalities in the human psyche, and just the depth of knowledge in those 12 archetypes that we see in the signs and how all-encompassing it is, it suggests a greater intelligence than we are. So everybody has a transcendent aspect, and mostly we deal with it in the dream plane. My experiences were dreams. So one of the things that has come back to me ever since I started doing this career publicly, really I began writing on 96, but had my own book that I wrote in 98 and then my own website in 99. Very early along, I started to have people saying to me, David, you came in my dream. Do you remember what you said to me in my dream? And what I have always tried to explain to people is, I am a symbol of your transcendent aspect. If you like the work that I've said, and you like the things I've done, and then I show up in your dream, believe me, I'm not Santa Claus. I'm not having, thousands of dreams a night with different people and different conversations, because that's how much it would have to be for all these things to literally be me. It's your transcendent aspect, and it will show up in different forms depending upon what the dream wants you to know about it. So my transcendent aspect appeared as Obi-Wan Kenobi because that was the best thing I had seen up until then to be a symbolic representation of my transcendent aspect.
And, David, let's wrap things up now because I think we're all actually running out of juice on our collective cameras here. But, hey, thank you so much for being with us. I mean, this was an amazing interview again, and please feel free to come back anytime you want to talk to us or you want to let people know what's going on. We really appreciate you and everything you're doing.
And I guess before we wrap up here, I want to give you a chance just to say any last words. I think you're working on another book and whatnot, and you can talk about your book that came out recently.
Sure. So there's a lot of interesting things we could talk about, like this camera over here already died, so now I just got one camera. So I am working on my new book, Awakening in the Dream. It will come out in August. I'm in a crunch right now where I'm going to have to be working on it all day, every day in order to get it done. But there's been some very amazing stuff going on in my life that I wanted to just touch on briefly. And this, again, kind of stretches credulity, but it's just part of what I've been dealing with. As you guys know, way back when I launched my website in 1999, the initial focus that I had was on these apparent dream messages that I was getting that were prophetic in nature, right? And I had a lot of this kind of stuff. A lot of messages from what I called the dream voice, which was I used the principles of remote viewing as I read about in books on remote viewing, such as books by Dr. Courtney Brown, like the end of the book Cosmic Voyage has a whole appendix in there telling you how to do remote viewing in very specific language. I used these protocols and I was able to pull in verbal messages that sounded very weird and cryptic when they came in, but then later proved to have astonishing accuracy in predicting future events. I talked about this a lot when my work first got started online, and I found that people really can't handle the idea of so-called angelic communication and these kinds of messages. Yes, Neil Donald Walsh wrote Conversations with God. Yes, you have the Seth books by Jane Roberts. Of course, the Law of One was created this way. And then, of course, you have the Casey readings, where 14,000 documented readings, where he's able to diagnose people's medical problems and then prescribe treatments, only having their name and address and agreement from them that they would be at a certain place when the reading happens. I ended up having very similar types of results as Edgar Casey. And then there's all this intrigue about the fact that my face looks very, very similar to Edgar Casey's face.
Really does. I mean, you know, we were looking at it and actually my first reaction was just like, wow, it looks like David Wilcock, you know? And then, I mean, but that's what we heard. We heard that when you reincarnate, you do bring a lot of the same features of your previous life with you. So it made sense to us in that sense.
That's straight ahead scientific research by Dr. Ian Stevenson, who used 3,000 cases of reincarnation in the Middle East, kids that remembered who they were before, where he could then follow up on their memories and prove that it was true. And he found that in every good reincarnation case, there is a precise forensic face match. And then, of course, he was followed up by Dr. Jim Tucker, who works for the same hospital, who has now used police forensic face matching software to prove that these ongoing reincarnation cases, including kids in America that he found, that their faces matched who they remember being before. So there's clearly something really weird, like a spiritual component to your face, your facial features, that goes beyond heredity and what your parents look like. There's something about you that you bring with you that you look the same from one lifetime to another. It's a fascinating discussion. And I have this book that a lot of other people have seen. It's called Edgar Casey's Photographic Legacy. It's got a brown cover, and it's just chock full of pictures from Edgar Casey's life. And you can see all of these people from his life, and I have identified now, I think, over 12 of all the top people in Casey's life who are the top people in my life. And they look the same, and the same kind of stories, and the same kind of intrigue. And some of these things, some of these interactions I had were painful. I had a lot of apparent karma that I had to work off. So it wasn't like it was all great and happy stuff. And some of this stuff is so private that I'm not going to show these cases. I'm not going to reveal these people's names, and I'm not going to show you their faces because it's just a little too weird. But like basically every single person of significance in Casey's life, I've found them. They showed up seemingly at random in my life. I know who they are, and we've had our own stuff to work out in this lifetime. So with that being said, one of the weird things that happened when I was doing these readings was that I would get backed up with my cassettes, because I would dictate this stuff into cassettes. I wouldn't remember what I was saying. I would be kind of aware as it was happening that something's going on. But the goal of the remote viewing protocol is to just relay information without any analysis and without any emotional reaction. You just let yourself talk, let the talking happen, do it really slow, and then put your mind in another place so you're not listening to it. And if you're in a deep enough meditation, this does work. So the stuff would sound very cryptic, very weird sometimes, but it would predict the future. So it was very common that I'd have a stack of cassette tapes on my desk, and they might be a month old. So the time I dictated them was a month ago, right? So like, let's say it's January, but I dictated the tape in December. Then I sit down in January to transcribe it. And then the tape starts describing what happened right before I sat down at the desk. And so that's one of the things that, to get the record straight, I'm writing all this up in my new book, Awakening in the Dream, which will be out in August. But what's so strange is that, I was having writer's block on the book for various reasons. There's been a lot of really crazy stuff going on in my personal life and in the world. And all of a sudden, I have a dream. This was in December, where it was telling me about the particular date of December 1998. Go back and look at December 1998. A dream told me this, okay? So I went back to December 1998, and I started reading around that time, and then a little bit before, and then eventually I started to read from the beginning of 1998, because here's the deal, guys. I found the most astonishing 20-year time loop.
We have taken you to the edge. Please watch your step.
Now, I've had time loops before. I've written about them on my website. I've had a 10-year time loop, a 12-year time loop, where it's so strange, but like a dream will tell me, because I've been keeping meticulous daily records of my dreams since 1996 in written stuff on my computer, and since 1992 in handwritten notebooks. And then I went from 92 to 96 was all notebooks, and then 96 onward was all computer files, right? The scope of this 20-year time loop is so bizarre because back in 1998, I'm living in the loft of a barn, okay? But it knew that I was going to be living in Colorado and California. It knew my wife's name. It knew that I had a manager who was this guy who was a very famous person in the 70s, Leon Isaac Kennedy. It didn't have him by name, but it had all the details about him and the work that we're doing. Jimmy Church was in there. Even the fact that Jimmy Church had invited me to a Christmas party I wasn't able to go to because I just had oral surgery, I had a huge black eye. But that the members of Motley Crue were going to be at this party, and that was one of the things he was saying, I'd meet these guys from Motley Crue. 20 years ago, they're describing Jimmy Church in a dream. They're describing Motley Crue. They actually said Motley Crue. They're describing my manager, Leon. They're describing my wife. They're giving her name. They're describing all the events that are going on in my own life right now and in the world. And what it appears to be is that I had to go through a 20-year sort of class, a 20-year initiation. And this is so complicated. There's so many specific examples that are so crazy. Let me give you an example just to show you how weird this is, okay? I'm sitting in this room right next door to the room I'm in now, transcribing this stuff, rereading, well, not transcribing, but rereading from 1998. It says right in there, Sub-Zero hires someone else, okay? Very strange, and I didn't even know what the heck that meant. We have this Sub-Zero fridge here in the house. It's got this horrible noise because it's been there since 1987. It just buzzes and grinds and I had already spoken to the landlord and said, dude, we gotta like fix the compressors because the compressors are old. There's no oil in the bearings. They make these grinding noises now. It's driving us crazy. Look, we'll pay for half of it. Just please, can we get the Sub-Zero fridge fixed? So we had just had this conversation and it was a little bit contentious, right? And then I go back and it says 20 years ago, Sub-Zero hires someone else. And my landlord was pushing for us to hire someone else besides the Russian dude who could fix this that we had found and had already gotten an estimate from. And we did end up having the official Sub-Zero people come here. And they ultimately told us that they would not do the work because the refrigerator's so old that they don't warranty their work. So now we ended up having to go back to the other guy. So there it is, 20 years ago. Sub-Zero hires someone else.
That's weird.
I get it. I get that people are not going to believe me and they're going to think this is crazy, and that's fine. I did write a whole book on these time loops that are much larger. Synchronicity key. Time loops that go for 2,160 years. where you got Roman history and U.S. history, and the stuff that's happening in Roman history is very similar down to the day to the stuff happening in U.S. history. Big wars, the Watergate scandal. So if anybody hasn't seen that, go back and read my book, Synchronicity Key. In light of that, in light of a 2,160-year time loop, 20-year time loop's nothing. But what's so cool is I have very precise descriptions of what's going on in my life right now. And the time loop says that the immediate future, I don't know how long, I mean, it could be months, maybe not even that long. But it basically says, get ready, because everything that you've been working for your whole career is about to hit, which I assume includes exposing the cabal, some kind of UFO truth, some kind of disclosure. So it's so surreal for me right now. You know, and I know a lot of people probably just going to laugh, and that's fine. But for me personally, knowing that this is true, sitting down and reading something from 20 years ago that's describing what's going on in my life right now, and then it's also prophetic in that it's telling me what's about to happen. This is why I feel confident in sharing with you guys and with your audience. Get ready for the 2-week disruption. Make sure you got your water, your rice and beans, your toilet paper, your feminine products, things to heat the house if you need to. If you have a wood stove, get extra wood. Because it really does look like the tribunals have begun. People in the deep state are already being arrested. Kim.com is predicting a much bigger WikiLeaks data dump than anything we've seen up until now. New financial system, decloaking of classified UFO type technology, the big one. So we've been waiting a long time. This audience has been very impatient. They keep getting mad. They say, why hasn't it happened yet? I've lost faith. I've lost hope. David's a liar. Why isn't this happening? I do honestly believe, and all the dreams I'm having lately too are saying this. We are in the middle of history in the making. Legendary things are happening. And the people who have been talking about this before this goes public will become much bigger names and heroes. And so that includes you guys, Ben and Rob, everybody on your staff. Thank you guys so much for the work that you've been doing to help educate humanity. I really appreciate it.
Well, I mean, this is what we're all doing. And this is why, you know, we're not doing this really to make money. This is not the point. The point is to really help people, educate people, and be a guide for people. You know, we're diving into this, learning as much as we can. But I mean, going on with what you're saying, I mean, both Rob and I have had a lot of visions and all kinds of things. And this is just something that we just knew, that I knew, especially growing up a long time ago, that I was going to be doing something like this that was going to be helping a lot of people. I just didn't know what it was. And I kept asking for this guidance of like, I just know I'm here to help people, but what is it I'm supposed to be doing? And we connected, and then it's like gradually, this is kind of, you know,
and then all of a sudden we're on a show with David Wilcock.
Well, I'm impressed with the production value that you guys have accomplished, and it's something I really feel proud of to be a part of. And I have so many things going on in my life right now that I couldn't take the time to do all the work to make it look as good as what you guys are doing, because you guys have a whole team. So I appreciate being a part of your team and being able to collaborate on this, knowing that you guys are coming from the right place, you have the right intentions. People might think that maybe you guys don't really support what I'm doing, or that I don't really support what you're doing. That's not true. You know, we're all on the same page, and I believe in what you guys are doing, and I know that it goes both ways. So again, I really want to thank you guys for your work.
We're happy to support people who are on the same wavelength as us. And it's really more for our fans, because we're kind of getting comments on both sides about things, but that's where we stand.
Well, the thing is, you guys, and you know this, there is so much evidence coming to light to support the conclusions that we're discussing. They are controversial, but it's almost as if no one, myself included, even with the research that I do and how dedicated I am, no one can even try to contain all of the provable evidence that you could research and look up. I mean, you guys hit me with several things in this interview that I didn't already know about. And we need to pull together. We need to pool our resources, even with those whom we disagree with, because we need to see the cabal likes divide and conquer. They want everybody in our community fighting with each other, trolling each other, writing hate comments. Why did you guys interview David Wilcock? Why did you guys interview Corey Good? Oh my God, I don't believe da 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 da. Even if you don't believe it, be in line with the idea that we want to face off against a common adversary, an adversary that is causing everybody to suffer, that's making everybody's lives miserable, that wants to kill off most of the world's population, that wants us all to be slaves with microchips in a total dictatorship society that's so much worse than what it's like right now. And that requires a unified effort, requires us to get behind people who we might not totally agree with, but we set aside our differences, just like in the movie White Squall, because we have to work as a team. We have to focus on a unified objective, which is saving the planet, creating a positive future, building the now that we want to be living in by shedding our denial, being willing to look at the truth, and being willing to align with others who also see the truth.
Amen.
That's amazing. Yeah, I think that's a really great point to end on.
It is.
It's such a positive statement, because we talked about some really dark things in this entire interview, and that's just such a positive statement to end on.
So David, we're going to end this.
Well, thank you guys for having me on. And again, I would also highly recommend everybody, please go check out our movie Above Majestic. That movie is the cosmic red pill. I just at the health food store had somebody yesterday saying to me he had just watched it. He was amazed to see me in person. We took a selfie. It's a film that opens your mind like nothing else that's out there right now. It does have a lot of upsetting information in it, but it also is information that will set you free. So that is the main thing that I've been promoting right now. The other thing that I'm about to do is I am going to launch an online class called Ascension Academy. So this is going to be like doing a conference with me. I think it's going to be 5 weeks long, and they will be video classes specifically on the deep spiritual aspect of this ascension process, what you need to do to get ready for it. I will go through the first 2 or 3 modules of setting the stage about the proof that ascension is happening in our solar system, interplanetary climate change, all the ascension prophecies and various ancient religions and spiritual teachings. But then I'm going to go into how do you prepare and how do you navigate your daily life with the challenges of the ascension path. And there's a lot of very specific information. There's a lot of quotes from the Law of One. There's a lot of practical tools for your life. And so this class, I think, is going to be very successful. It is a necessary, critical thing for my financing to get this class out there. It is not going to be free. It is going to be a paid class, and we will be doing takedowns if anybody tries to pirate it. Now that I have Content ID, that won't be too difficult. But that is a way to support us, to watch Above Majestic, to join the Ascension Academy when that comes out. And again, we do need your help. This is a grassroots funded effort, and we can't do it without you.
Awesome, David.
Sounds good.
So we'll end this in Edge of Wonder style.
Okay, sounds good.
This is David Wilcock on Edge of Wonder, and we will see you on the edge.
That's perfect.
Okay, that's cool.
We didn't do anything. Just made our jobs easy. Thank you, man. This is so great.
This is great. This is great. Thank you so much.